Hey everybody, welcome to Quest for Peace. I'm Iyaz. I'm your host of sorts. If you don't know me, I don't know how you found the video, but assuming you found this video, you might know me from places like twitch.tv. I used to do a lot of online video there. Prior to that, I used to do a lot of online video independently. So at this point in my life, I've been thinking about being happy. I've actually been thinking about it for a lot of years. And that's basically driven every decision I do from like second to second. I just want to be happy. What is it going to be happy? If that means moving across the country for a job or deciding to drop weight or doing whatever it is, like going rock climbing, these kinds of things, it's all influenced by the same idea. I just want to figure out how to be content because one of the things that's always been in my head has been this driving force of like, I've got to accomplish goals. But the thing is,
hmm
this is not to brag. I have accomplished a lot of my goals. And the thing is, once you've done that, you don't have a lot of immediate contentment based on that because now you've done it, you're looking for the next thing. So, what I'm doing with this show is I'm explaining to you folks the fun journey I've been going through, but also I bring in guests. And today we've got Radford Castro of twit.tv and lazytechguys.com. Is it .com?
Yes.
.com. And let's introduce Radford Castro to the audience. Radford,
Yeah.
if nobody's ever heard of you and they're like, who the heck is this guy? Could you please explain yourself to the audience, sir?
I'm the director of engineering at twit.tv, and I make things tick and talk over there. Prior to that, of course, I was the editor in chief for Lazy Tech Guys. And prior to that, I did a lot of stuff for the Homeland Security. So I've been in the IT business for a long time, a lot of it mostly development. But I've met some pretty cool people along the way, from TechCrunch all the way down to CNET. So it's been a cool ride so far. But
All the way down to
I'm
CNET. You know, I happen to work
all
all
the
the
way
way
down to
down there.
CNET.
Yeah, the
You're not
lows
the
of the
only
low, apparently. All right. So now, when you found out I was doing this show, Radford and I used to work together at Twit. He would be occupying an office, and I would be sitting on the studio, and I would occasionally glance over to him and threaten death regularly in the chat room, or I would just be looking over and just be pointing at him, telling him that he was next in my line of chaos. So you can see that we had a decent working relationship. Why did you want to be on this show? Because you seemed like you had something you wanted to talk about. So what's up?
So you said you hit it on the nail when you were talking about goals, and it's true. I feel like I feel the same way you feel because I feel like I've accomplished a lot during my couple of years. But the question I've always had to answer myself is why we do these things. And it's funny because we attended a party not too long ago, and I was listening a little bit to the history that you had, which just made me want to be on this podcast even more. And I just kept thinking about, wow, man, how the hell is this guy doing everything and still trying to go for that pursuit? I mean, we're all going after that pursuit of happiness. We're all trying to go after that specific thing that kind of makes us tick and why we do things. And even till now, even with a family and being a dad, about to be a dad of three soon, it's somewhat crazy. But I feel like I'm almost there. But I'm still missing a little few pieces. But I think I'm there. I think I'm there. Um,
Okay,
but
so on
it's
your
been a
journey
long
to
journey.
getting there, on your
hmm
journey to getting there, I'm assuming you've had, since you're goal oriented like me, you've
hmm
probably reached those goals. Did you find like a hollowness in that in achieving them?
Yes, I did. Before, I remember. So I grew up in a pretty somewhat large family. Well, I have two brothers and one sister, and a lot of us were the type of people that really pushed each other. My mom was the type that kind of pushed us, but my dad was sort of like the guy that just was sort of, hey, you know what, do your thing, I'll do my thing. You know what I mean? So it was a very weird environment that we grew up in, and we were always trying to accomplish things. We were trying to outdo each other, but we weren't sure why we were doing it. So the big hole was, like, for instance, I would run these marathons, and you would reach the end, and it was the most incredible feeling. But then at the very end, you're like, you meet other people, and they're doing it more and more and more, but they're not sure why. So you're kind of thinking, man, I would love to be at that level, but you're always finding out there's someone better than you. You're always finding out is one goal higher than you. And then at some point you kind of think about it and say, well, you know what? I think I just need to think about this core piece of myself, this part of me, which, you know, the title of your podcast totally echoes upon that, which is the quest for peace. And I think I'm there. It's just, I think it just comes down to me. I think it just comes down to acceptance. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm trying to find a little bit of that peace. It's pretty crazy, but I'm hoping to share a little bit more. And I was hoping to hear a little bit more about, you know, you. I mean, we got a chance to work together, and
Hmm.
I was a bit bummed out when you moved on, but at the same time, you know, I'm just kind of glad that we're kind of having this connection because I just felt like that, you know, just knowing you even for a short time, you were into all these things that I was also into, and I had a whole group of friends that weren't onto these things, and they would be very focused on certain things. But you were probably one of the few that I know to have this very diverse set of skill sets. And I mean, you fix cars. You
Hmm.
fix
I used
cars, you're
to.
into sports, you're into comics. Yeah, so it's one of these things that I can totally relate to. And I figured I'd go, wait, maybe if I could just tap a little bit into what Iyaz is doing, maybe I might get there. Maybe there's a new bridge I
Now,
need to cross.
Now, yeah, one of the reasons why I switched jobs was in the pursuit of happiness. I haven't talked a lot about that much, apart from that FAQ. People asked a bunch of questions, but it
Hmm.
came down to just the idea of I needed to be happy at what I was doing and where I was, and I wasn't happy where you currently work. So I don't want to trash that too much. I'm just saying that that's why I changed jobs, and I've changed jobs a number of times to the point with my resume where it has like 5 years worth of work, but like I've been everywhere because I just keep looking for the best place. And I think I'm in a really great place right now with CNET because they let me do lots of different things, and they're basically going to allow me to do video if I want to do it, basically as much as I want to do, which is really kind of helpful. But yeah, so if you guys don't know, Radford touched on this. I really don't. I don't necessarily like talking about myself, but I do have a crazy set of background skills. I have a bio degree. I've got. I went to automotive school for a year. If you're in the New York area, you might have heard of Apex Tech. I went there for 18 months. The day I graduated, I got into law school. I was a tech nerd the whole time. Graduated law school. Ended up doing some tax law at NYU, and then I got a job in tech again because the job market was just garbage. I'm also a sports fan. Growing up in New York, yes, I root for the dreaded Yankees. Yes, I grew up in Queens, and it makes
The
no
Yellow
sense why I
Empire.
root for the Yankees, but I root for the Yankees, and I know it's the hated team of the world. But yeah, I pay attention to a lot of these different things. So uh, that's me. And Andrew Zarian, who's in his good graces as he's producing this show, writing in the chat room, he wrote, "How can you like the Yankees?" And I'll explain that too right now, real quick. I did it to spite my older brother. He was a huge Mets fan, and it was '86. And this is the year the Mets actually win the World Series. And that's the year I decided to become a Yankees fan. And the Yankees really sucked back then. I mean,
Hmm.
if the Mets won the World Series, it lets you know how bad baseball was. I know I'm making fun, but the Red Sox really screwed up that year. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. So you mentioned the idea of acceptance. Being happy for me was always a struggle. It actually still is because I have a hard time just accepting that stuff is good instead of going, you know what, this could be better. I can fix this. I can do this. I can do this. I can do that. And I'm constantly like iterating like things like my living room, my setups. How did you find your ability to start accepting things, and that would actually realize that that made you happy?
God. Well, just to preface it a little bit, part of it was kind of my belief system. I went through probably like seven different religions. I was a Buddhist before. I was trying to chase all these things, you know, thinking of what reason why I do things. And I think part of the acceptance was part of the, I guess, the fact that how I felt like I could get accepted to that is I think, and this is gonna sound gruesome, was funerals. And every time I attended one, you know, it was sort of a grim fact that you know we all are going to end up in that same place at some level, you know, at some time. And you know, every time I went to one, I would hear a eulogy. You know, I would hear someone talk about what that person thought of them. You know what I mean, or that memory of that person. And I guess it's sort of like a cleaning agent, right? Like I look at it and I think, you know what? I would like to at least have at least one or two people say something about me when I get out of here. And so I know it's kind of a deep thing, but I feel like that's kind of where we need to be in order to be, in order to get to the level of acceptance. My grandmother was probably the type of person that was always happy. She went through a lot when she was young. She raised my mom by herself, and I mean she grew up in the Philippines in the ghetto, and a lot of the times, she was really struggling, politically, and she was at one time, a secretary for the mayor. And I mean, she would tell me stories about how she was taken advantage of. So, and at that time, back in the days, there wasn't really much, help for the women. There was no women's rights or anything of that sort, especially if you're in a third world country like that. And she would always tell me these struggles, and even though she would mention to me, look, you're in a great place here. You just don't realize it. You should come down to the country at some point. And actually, I did, and that was kind of the acceptance for me to come down there and look at how things were. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, I would go to my country and would notice how people are like happy with even the most littlest things. And so looking back at that, I think about, well, I need to learn how to get into that mode. But because of the way we're growing up here in the United States, we're kind of given these things. I had to learn how to not take for granted a lot of those pieces. And so my mom and my grandma was a big piece. They were a big driving force of that. My dad, probably not so much. He came from a little bit more uh, a different type of family. They had different perspectives. They had a more, it's me first before you first sort of thing. But yeah, but not to get too personal. I think the main thing really is just the fact that we really grew up with divergent philosophies. My parents. So it makes me wonder how, how they grew up the way they did and how my parents got together. But it's pretty crazy how just things like the parents, make a big deal over how a child's life can determine the happiness earlier or later in life.
Yeah, my folks, I'm a first generation American, and so I was pushed to be either one of two things, doctor or lawyer. Did you have that same kind of
Mm.
thing going? Like you
Yeah,
had to
well,
be
it
one
was
of these
for
things?
yeah. So in for Filipinos, it was either a nurse, doctor, something in the medical field, or
Hmm.
something in engineering. And thankfully, I liked engineering. I just didn't know what I was going to get into, but they were the type of people who were like, why are you into this? Why are you taking drama classes? Or why are you doing marathons? Or why are you, it was sort of like that. They had a very fixed view about, what our nationality should or should not be doing. So, but that was just their perspective. That's kind of how they were grilled. That's kind of the cycle of the way it was back, in the country. And obviously I don't represent what they say, but, or all Filipinos say, but for majority, that's kind of how it was. And, we to try to pursue that sort of that bridge where you kind of like, okay, you know what, I think I'm okay crossing this thing. It was sort of mind numbing because for me growing up in the United States and growing in the Philippines, and my parents growing up in the Philippines, especially my grandma, it's a culture shock for them. It was a culture shock for me. Their values are different from ours, or at least some parts of it. So we try to meet in the middle. But I think I'm almost there. I'm hoping that my third kid is sort of that part. So,
Well, not to be too morbid. I've been known to be a morbid person.
mm,
Death to me is so. Death has influenced my life. My
hmm
father died when I was 23. He was actually no, I wasn't 23. I was 24. He was 53 when he died, and it was relatively young. It was unexpected, and it gave me this giant jolt as to this idea of, okay, you're not only will you die, but it can happen in an unexpected time, and if you don't actually start living to a point where you're enjoying yourself and you're saying one day I will be happy and one day I'll take a
hmm
trip and one day I'll do this. That if you
hmm
keep putting it off and if you just buckle to fear, like, you know what, I can have this backup job, I can do this other thing really well, but I don't want to pursue my dream in case I fail. That to me kind of got washed away with my father's death, and it completely messed up my head when I was young. And so, I mean, I'm not terribly young at the middle of 20s, but he was only in his 50s, so it was not expected. And I think that it gives us enough. One of the episodes, I think episode 2, we're talking to Tim Stevens. Oh, 1 second. Back.
Yeah. Can
Okay,
hear you fine.
I'll pick up again. In a previous episode, we were talking to Tim Stevens about perspective. And that's really what this whole thing is about. If you can have an event, I mean, you don't really want to have these events in your life, but if you can understand how the grand scale of your life will be, the little things shouldn't bother you as much. Because I know I used to get worked up over everything. And I'll share another stupid story where my roommate put like a spoon next to the sink instead of putting it in the sink, and that drove me just freaking crazy, absolutely crazy. And I started arguing about this, and I'm like, why the hell am I arguing about this? I should just put the spoon in there and shut up. Just these small things that were driving me nuts. So you've come from an interesting background too. So if you happen to like engineering, I happen to like law, so that's why I did that over biology. What other thing, if you didn't do engineering, what do you think you would be doing?
Oh God, if I wish I was athletically built, I would be doing sports. But I probably would. I'd probably get into journalism. I'd probably, I don't know. I'd probably get into the medical field, but something different. I probably wouldn't be a nurse or doctor. I don't know. I might be a radiologist. Who knows? But I've always liked also the creative side of things. So I've even gotten into things like plays, if you can believe that. I've also I'm a huge car buff, so I've always wanted to get in mechanics. But it's one of those things where I've always been trying to find myself because I didn't really have much of an identity when I was growing up. I was sort of the guy that kind of jumped from group to group, but never had really a place to belong. But that just came down to knowing who I really was and knowing what I wanted. And at that time, I was doing things because that's what kind of excited my friends. You know what I mean? I was sort of that guy that tried to please people at the time. But now that I've reached a certain point in life, you know, when I first went to my first funeral and the second and third, and it was like it ranged from friends to family to like teachers, and these were all people that impacted my life. And it would be that sort of thing where it was like, God, you know, all these guys, they had something to say about them. You know, I would like to be mentioned at least once. But again, I just thought also about there's a speech I also watch once in a while. It's the one that's made by Steve Jobs. And the 4 words that stick out were stay hungry, stay foolish. And it's that speech that he made in Stanford, I think in 2005 or 2006, where he talks about how we need to stay hungry and stay foolish. And he also mentions about death and how he was close to it. And so that sort of thing really resonated with me. And I thought about that sort of thing, but it still didn't explain the one little thing, which was why, you know, why we do it and why we should be, you know, striving to be, you know, hungry, and why we should be striving to be foolish. And his reasoning was, you know, if you're going to be doing work, it needs to be something that you love doing, and it's going to be a big portion of your work, just as you have sleep, and you might as well make it be something that you love doing. So, you know, I thought of that. I think at where I'm at right now in my life in terms of engineering and development, because I love to code, I love to build things. And so the only thing I've always missed in my previous employment was the fact that I never had more creative freedom than I do now. And I think that's what I feel like I got now. I think the only thing that I think is missing now is just someone to share it with. Now I have that. So now I have the family portion. I have, you know, a wife that's sort of my rock. So we talk about this stuff all the time. And she said she would explain to me, because why are you doing this podcast? Are you not happy? And I go, I don't think it's that. I think it's just my expression of it. So she actually watched one of the episodes, and she said that it was probably the most insightful thing she'd seen. And I go, you got to meet this guy Iyaz, man, because he's a freaking rocking guy, dude. No, it's funny because when I first met you, like, it was probably my second or third weekend, and I'll never forget the thing you said. You said, you go, man, why isn't everything fixed yet, right? And then I told him, I said straight out, I go, you guys should be friggin' happy. And then you were laughing so hard. In my mind, I was thinking, oh, okay, this is definitely the attitude I should have. You know what I mean? This is kind of like, you know what I mean? I shouldn't really, if I really care about my job, if I really care about what I love doing, it shouldn't really matter, you know? But the fact that you really joked about it, it just made me, it just put a, like, a bulb in my head. I go, man, it shouldn't really matter. I should just love this no matter what. Do you remember, do you know who Tony Gonzalez is? The tight end
The football
for,
player?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, the
from
guy who does
Kansas
that
City.
FitStar app now.
Yeah, he does that stuff, right? So I was watching his show. Well, not show, but I was watching a special on NFL Network where he was talking about how he's still at the top of his game, how he can still do these routes and catch the balls and do all this stuff with the quarterback. But he would always come back after a game loss, like a really close loss. He would tell his family, he would tell his wife, I can't stand this. I work so hard and I do this and I do this and I do that. And it's gotten to the point now, where they get to the playoffs and then they lose in the playoffs after their first shot. That I just can't do it anymore. I just can't take it, and I think I'm ready to do this. I think I'm ready to retire, because I mean, there's guys that I know even after all of that, they can keep working at it and they'll end up in the playoffs again and maybe into the Super Bowl. And then there's me, and I think I'm ready for that. I think I'm ready to lay down on it. I think I'm happy not to have a Super Bowl ring. And I was like, wow. And I think I'm okay with that. And I think I could be happy. And when he was mentioning these things, it gave me it made me think about that other side too. I mean, the other side of not being able to accomplish that goal. And that can happen. I mean, that has happened with me in the past where, I had worked with lots of friends before and lots of people, some venture caps, some other people that had, hey, Rad, let's go start this company. We would have we would be working, but there would be always something happening. There would be too many cooks in the kitchen. Management would be in the way. We wouldn't have. There would be lazy people. I mean, all the things you would think of a startup that would fail, it would fail. And for my mind, I would think, God, I just can't do this. I love starting my own company. I would love to do this. I would love to, be the next Instagram or the next Facebook. But I don't think that's going to happen. But I think I'm okay with that. It was only until I started moving back and forth into the corporate world, into the startup, into the medium-sized business, that I started thinking about, maybe it's not really about that. Maybe it's about the people, maybe it's about the journey. And I think that's what really matters at that point. And I think if I can walk the walk without having to look at where I'm walking, I think I'm okay. So as long as I'm not looking at my feet instead of just looking straight, I think I'll be fine. My wife has been telling me how, why can't you just freaking be happy? You have everything you have. You have a nice home. We have, you have the cars you wanted. You had this and this. You have the kids. You have the family. You have me. What the hell is your problem? and I'm just thinking, I don't know what it is. I am happy. I feel like I am. I think I'm missing a little piece. Maybe it's just our third daughter. I think that's probably it. Maybe I need a party of five. I don't know. And she's like, "You're just stupid. Are you a freaking idiot?" Like, she would just grill that on me. But I think that's the thing about her is that, and I think that's probably why I married her, because she's so sure of herself. And I think that's the piece that I'm really missing. I think I'm further along there. I just keep asking her to be patient with me. I keep asking her to walk the walk with me, and then she's like, "This is too long of a walk," but I'm there with you. So I'm like, "That's awesome." And I think that's also the reason why I resonate with you, is because when you are pursuing these goals, I mean, I see you accomplish a lot of crap, in your day. I'm like, how's this dude a lawyer and he's doing this? I mean, he could be like earning oodles of money if he wanted to. But I mean, as you said, and we've had these internal discussions before, you've always like wanted to go to things that you wanted to go after. You wanted to do things that you were happy for, and that makes me proud as being your friend. You know what I mean? Because I would think about that sort of thing, and I would say that's awesome, man. And it used to be that I would need to have a lot of friends because I would try to please everyone. I always
Mhm.
boasted the fact that I had so many friends. Like, oh man, look at did you read to Rad's 18th birthday party? Did you check out Rad's 25th? He was like off the hook, this and that. But in the end, when things really hit the ceiling, and then you see the small crowds of people that are sort of there for you, that's when you knew you were really happy, because those are the people that were kind of there. They were just they were there. They said hi during your birthday when things were hitting their ceiling. They were there when things were just not right for both of you, and that's kind of what I've settled down to. It used to be that I would try to pursue, the fame of it all. Like I would like try out for track or try out for tennis just because, this chick or that chick was, interested in tennis, and Radford's, he's actually trying out. I'm like, oh yeah. But then it was sort of the wrong deal. It was the wrong reason. And then when you finally get to meet this person, it's like, oh, she is nothing like you thought she would be. Um, and that's kind of what happened. And it was really just me figuring out, who I was and just trying to identify who I was going to be. But um, I think it just came down to finding the right person, I think, in my life. So yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of deep, but this is a kind of a deep podcast, right?
Yeah, it's not meant to. It's not to. I mean, there's a lot of on this program. I don't even. This is really hardly a show. It's like this is the stuff that I would have liked to hear while I was trying to figure this out myself. And I'm not trying to shill anything, but if you go to iyaz.tv, I'll have links to the resources I've used, the books I've read. That basically gave me like a kickstart in the head because I like the thing that you mentioned that was clicking with me right now is the question being asked of you. You've got all this stuff. Why aren't you happy? And I was constantly asking myself this question because I had accomplished a lot and I was relatively young. And I'm like, well, this is really good. So you should be like, in my head, there was a voice saying, you should be happy. Why aren't you happy? And and the worst thing was it sounded like that. Like it was angry that it wasn't happy. So it was like,
I said it
okay,
to you in my
why?
office, man.
Right. So that's the thing. Like, that voice, that voice where I'm like, why isn't this happening? And it just becomes this weird thing of like hearing that internal voice that's upset that you're not happy does not make you happy. So then it makes you in this little spiral of doom of like, you become really upset. And, I don't know. I'm really curious about as to how open I should be on this, but I'll just completely open up stuff right now.
Just do it.
When it came to this, is one of the issues I had in my first marriage. It was I could not talk to my partner about this because she did not want to constantly analyze happiness. She didn't want to talk about this with me, and that like I'm hearing you have that, and you're able to talk about this, and you're like, look, I want to be happy, and you guys want to talk about it. I couldn't talk to somebody about this, and I'd have to lean on my friends from college and stuff. And it was troubling for me at home because I couldn't express myself and I couldn't figure out stuff. And it was just, I mean, my brain wasn't figuring it out by itself. So what am I going to do? But having that partner to tell you, hey, it's okay. And I pretty damn sure I got that right now. But this idea that you have somebody who's like, okay, look, I can do this for you. I can handle this. And you want to analyze this. Other people, it's not about the quantity of people. I will tell you that. You're mentioning Radford, having lots and lots of friends. I always wanted that when I was younger because I wasn't terribly popular and I was a weird kid. So I was a brown-skinned kid in a Catholic school who wasn't Catholic. So like lots of reasons with a funny name. And so like, I didn't fit in. And then I was actually taken to Pakistan when I was about 13. I'm like, great, people like me. But I didn't fit in there either because they're like, oh, he's an American. So like I was rejected by them and by like grade school kids. And so I was like, okay. Although I fit in okay at school. I was funny and stuff because I was always self-deprecating. So you think though you went through 7 religions, right? Now, do you believe yourself to be a religious person now, or do you think yourself as spiritual, or what's your deal with that?
I think of it that way. So I think of myself as spiritual. I used to be in those Bible studies and prayer groups and things like that. And I still respect those people. There's just those extreme people that are just like, it has to be absolute versus relative. Everything needs to be absolute. And I'm like, how are you so sure? You know what I mean? I mean, how do you know what God's will is? I mean, no one knows. And you're telling me what you think God's will is for me? No. And so it kind of got me sick to the stomach. You know what I mean? I'm going to do what I think is right. And there's people from my church and there's people from other communities, even people where I used to be those religions. I'm still in touch with them. And if my Catholic friends have a problem with me hanging out with my atheist friend, my Buddhist, and my Hinduist friend, I mean, that's their problem. Then they're not really Catholics. You know what I mean? That's how I thought of it. And they're not really spiritual people. And so that's kind of where I am now. So you were mentioning earlier how you were thinking, I didn't fit in with certain people. For me, I try to fit in everybody's, try to fit in everybody's group. And the thing is, there were some people that were like, "Oh man, Rad is so cool." Or Rad's like, "Rad doesn't need to be in this group. Why the hell is he here? He hangs out with XYZ." I mean, he hangs out with this guy. He hangs out with Iyaz. Why the hell does he hang out with Iyaz? You know what I mean? I'm like, Iyaz is freaking cool. What's your freaking problem? You know what I mean? And and then at some point you're thinking, well, gosh, if the entire circle is gonna bow down to that one guy, I don't want to be part of that. So, but for that time being, I just kept doing it because it just felt cool to be acknowledged, and I think that was the problem I didn't have. And I'm gonna have to confess a little bit. I'll be a little bit open in my personal life here. My dad and I were not really too close. Of course, I needed that sort of approval, and I think it probably came from my friends. Now, you were mentioning earlier about in your first marriage that you were able to tell that to your partner. Truth be told, it was the same thing with my wife and I. My wife was very straight shooter. I was not so straight shooter, and she was the type of person that knew what she was, but she was always reserved, very quiet, never really spoke a lot. But and it always irked me when we always had these silent times. I always wanted her like, "Age, what do you think about this?" And I was sick of her short answers. I was sick of like, "Well, why didn't you think about this? I mean, what do you think about?" It goes, "Well, if he doesn't like me, whatever." But in my mind, I'm like, "Well, you should be approved by this guy. You should be approved. This is my friend." But now, I'm at the point now where I'm thinking, this is now my wife. This is the person that I've married, and for the first couple of years, it was like that because her friends were sort of different from mine, but now that her friends are kind of my friends, and she's gotten along with mine, and it's slowly getting around to the point where we're getting used to the way our attitudes are. It's now she's become more colorful, and the same with me. I've become a little bit more reserved. I used to be really, just like speaking out loud, and saying things I shouldn't probably be saying, but she's really changed like my perspective and things. But in the same regard, she's also looked at, I can't just be apathetic. I need to like think about people too, even though they're not in my circle. And so we've kind of rounded each other in that regard, and I felt like that was kind of important. That I've always looked at. I also look for those things when I talk to friends or when I talk to people I just meet. So that's sort of the thing I saw in you, is that you take people in an objective point of view, and I resonate with that because I think that's more important than anything. And I've always told myself, and my grandma has always told me, respect is more important than popularity. And so when she noticed that I was getting a lot of these friends and stuff, she goes, "It doesn't matter. Respect is more important." And it just dawned on me. It makes a lot of sense. It's the same thing. You watch the greatest athletes in the world. When you see a Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, there's going to be some athletes that hate their guts, but they respect them. And they're going to be like, what? I hate the fact that he keeps winning, but I freaking love that I respect this guy because he works his butt off. And that's what I kind of saw in you. You would work your tail off in your shows. Like I would just see you sit in the cafeteria and you're just like, going through every single step. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so overly detailed, but that's pretty awesome. And there were fans of yours that were in the other company that was working next to Twit that would say, "Oh, I love Know How." Every time that thing turned on, Suzanne would say, "I love this show." And he goes, "I just love how it's produced. It's so, I mean, it seems like a lot of work." And I go, "Yeah, it does." And I think that's the thing. I think that's what I feel like I resonate with. So like the people I like hanging around with is hard workers, people who are very enthusiastic and are entrepreneurish, and irregardless of what interest they have, I just felt like I can resonate with those people. And those people tend to be happy because they're pursuing something that, even though it seems impossible, they know that that's what they want. And even though they're going to be eating top ramen for a year, that's what they're going to do. Do you remember, I mean, you obviously heard of The Verge, right? Have you heard of that show that they do called Small Empires?
Yes, I've heard.
I think,
I've watched like one episode of it. Yeah.
yeah, so that guy, Alexis, I forgot his last name, but he hangs out with these guys. I think one of them was called Photocracy or something like that, where he talks
Hmm.
about these two guys that just talked about making gamifying fitness and stuff. And I was watching how these guys struggled, the struggle, and they were just at the brink point of just quitting. And then one guy was just like, "Well, I don't think I could be happy with this. Let's keep going. I don't care if it kills us." And they just went for it. And now they're at the top of their game, yeah, at least in terms of gamifying and producing a company that's growing now. So that's kind of amazing. And I'm hoping to do that. Probably more so on the family side, but yeah, I've been working with my wife on that. Like, yeah, so it's been really really good. I think we just need to get rid of our clutter. So
That I'm gonna hit on the clutter thing in just a second because I was
yeah.
thinking about because that just triggered a whole other thing. But before we get to that, I want to talk about just pursuing a passion, like you were mentioning, and like I was saying before, this show, whatever the heck you want to call this thing, is about what I wanted to hear when I was doing this. And there is this huge reward in pursuing your passion. First thing you got to
Mhm.
do though is identify what you want to do. And I mean, like, what would you do for free? That's usually the question they ask you. If you were set for life with money, like you win the lottery and you make like here's like $2 billion, what would you do every day? And I knew for me, it would be doing tech and video because that's what I love to do. Like I'm constantly messing with stuff in the house. I love technology and I like explaining stuff. Even though I'm not necessarily the best guy at it, I do enjoy discussing this stuff on camera or even just making videos. Even if I'm not a part of the online or on air part of it at this point, I do like
Mhm.
the idea of helping making video because I've been fascinated with TV forever. Just find what your passion is, as easy as that is, and pursuing it. The There was this a piece of advice from Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller. He
Mm.
goes, never take a job that has nothing to do with what you want to do. So if you're a magician, don't be a waiter. Go out there and do magic acts that don't pay a lot. Just keep doing that thing. Build a body of work in that field. Don't go out there and do something that has nothing to do with what you're doing. Because otherwise, it's going to breed laziness and you're not going to be able to move along with that. I found it to be really true, really helpful. It's scary. I will tell you that because like if you're not getting paid a lot of money, you're not getting paid anything because you're pursuing your passion. You're frightened. You're like, what am I going to do? So you got to kind of
Mhm.
deal with it. So it's kind of a hard kind of line to deal with. Um, I think I got lucky. My folks were willing to support me throughout things, even though they discouraged me into my original pursuit of being a comic book artist because that's what I like to do. I like to draw. I still like to draw. It's
Mhm.
I don't know if I even like to draw or like to play music, but sometimes I get an idea in my head. And I'm like, I need it to get out. So I'll draw
Mhm.
it and leave it. Or if it's a song, I'll do the song and record it and done. But like it needs to get out. It's one of these weird things. Um, what about you on the creative side? Do you ever have that kind of thing going where like you're just like I need to do this? I mean, you've built websites before.
Right.
You've done Lazy Tech
Right.
Guys. What
Yep.
like forced you to create stuff? Because I feel like there's a drive within, but for me, like I need to get it out, or it will just eat at me until I do it.
Yeah, so Lazy Tech Guys was one of those big, big reasons. I think the what pushed me to do creative things was, I guess, my insatiable need to see that it was mine, that it was something I created, that it was mine. And, we buy things all the time. We buy cars, and I was like, it would be cool if I made my own game. It would be cool if I had my own app, my own site. And for a long, long time, I built a lot of sites for people, but it was never mine. And I would always offer suggestions. I would offer what I would think my professional opinion or what I think their direction of their site should be, and it would die 50% of the time. And I figured, gosh, I always knew what I think is needed on a website, what is needed to drive that site to the next level. Why can't I just freaking do it myself? So when I used to work for Homeland Security, my contract expired there. It was very, very, very political. But to make long story short, it got to the point where it was like, you know what? I'm not going to try to look for another job. I told my wife, I said, I know my daughter was just born and I don't have a job. My daughter is like 3 days old, and my son is I think 2, And my wife's like, if you're gonna go for this lazy tech guys thing, you better go 100%. You can't go 99. You can't go 80. You got to go 100%. So I said, well, right now it's sort of a joke between friends and I. We were thinking, oh, let's just start this blog and see where it goes. So we started, and I built this thing. But as I kept building, I kept adding things to it. I kept making it more cleaner and faster and more presentable and more modern and more responsive. And to the point where when I'm talking to people, they really appreciated it. So when we were interviewing people, like I literally begged to go to the CES, to the point where I had a friend who was at the CES who foot the bill because we didn't even have the traffic to get in there. It was so bad. Like we were generating, I think, what, maybe 300 or 400 visits a month or something. And he was
Yikes.
like, you know what? Yeah. He was like, here, man. Like, you know what? I feel so sorry for you. Here's a grand. Here's you and your friend. Go ahead and hang out at the CES. So my friend was the cameraman. I was doing the video. We were interviewing like these product people left and right. Um, and I could see like 50 Cent and all these other guys. I see Engadget. I saw Twit over there, and my friend and I were like, wouldn't it be cool if we worked over there? But at the same time, it was really interesting and funny because of the fact that, as I kept doing it, I really enjoy just interacting with these people and just seeing how they were just trying to build these products and going through the story of, look, this is something that, my dad and I started, and, we've been doing this for years. And I go, wow, and now you guys are here at CES. And then it was just the story of it. And that sort of thing kind of really pushed us and pushed me to pursue even more. And so that's what felt, that's what made me feel like I was pushing, that I needed to be creative, that I needed to create this thing, that I needed to be lazy tech guys, which was not so lazy. In one year, when at least the first 3 months, we had, I think, 1,500 hits. And then in the next following year, we had like 300,000 visits per month. It was crazy.
That's pretty dang good.
That's pretty crazy. I was like, we got to keep doing this thing. So we had people coming into the website. We had friends that were like, couldn't believe how we were generating this much traffic. And it's mostly because we would have these people that had like these strong followers, that were with them, that like, hey, can you tweet this out? So one person would have 15,000 followers, another one would have 20,000, and they would talk about our website. And at some point we were like, wow, our Twitter followers, we have 7,000 Twitter followers. How the hell is this happening? And this is just in a single year. And, we just kept going at it. And then I just felt more creative. I felt more like it was mine, and then I met you guys. And then I met Twit. And it was funny because I just worked at, one of my writers was actually invited to All About Android. We were invited to several shows. And on the fifth time, then I met Lisa, and she was like, oh, you guys got to do something here. And I was like, oh, that would be awesome. And then here I am. So, but the same thing remains. The same question was the same question you were pursuing, which was, how can I be happy, pursuing the thing I want to pursue? And right now I feel like I'm there, and I feel like having a family is sort of reflective of that. And I think if as long as I have those pieces and just turn that thing in my head that just says, you know what, Rad, you better look at everything in the world because you are retarded if you just look at what's around you and just keep going at it and plug away. Because I think there's still a lot to see with Twit. So, and I really believe in that. So, and I think that's what it comes down to, is belief too. I think it's another piece too.
Not necessarily talking about Twit, but how do you handle stress? When you're stressed,
how do I handle stress?
What's the first thing? Yeah, because when I get stressed, the first thing I do is I remove myself from the situation, basically have a huge amount of yelling in my head before I realize you got to stop that. Let's chill out. And this sequence will go on for about, what used to take like minutes, now takes a couple of seconds. Like it'll just be me taking a breath. But if I get stressed, it'll be this little spike point of like, my immediate reaction is like, whoever or whatever is stressing me out, it's like, I would like to wipe you from the face of the planet right now. But that was never an opportune situation, and I don't possess the Infinity Gauntlet just yet. So how do you handle stress when you're feeling the world crushing you?
Well, besides thinking I wish I had the Infinity Gauntlet to blow up the building, I think one of the things I would do is obviously I don't know if you noticed when we were used to work together, I would walk out of my office often when I do feel a lot of stress. I would just take a walk down like the alleyways, just try to get myself disconnected from the world as much as possible. Try to at least think about the most boring thing and repeat it in my head. But I think the thing that really also gets me releases my stress levels is sometimes either just a quick talk with a person. It may not necessarily be about the problem. It may just be just opening up some vents and just letting them know, I'm kind of going through a couple of things here and there. And sometimes listening ear helps. Other times when that's not happening, I take a drive around town. I just go in my Subaru and then just dash and do some spirited driving through the freeway. Not that I would be racing some people and go like 110 miles per hour, but just a casual drive across like the winding roads. That kind of eases the tension for me. I would also look at a couple of books. Tony Robbins is still somewhat helpful. If you look at my little Awaken the Giant Within, I kind of go through it once in a while. That's sort of my Bible. But for the most part, really, it's just really meditating on some really serene ideas. Like I tend to find out that I'm less stressful during rainy days. When I even hear the rain beating down the building or in my house, I feel a lot more at ease. But for the most part, it's usually just having a quick talk with my wife, seeing my kids, and maybe a drive around town. That's usually what I do to get the stress out. And you know what's also kind of helping me a lot too, and I wish I had, is a heavy bag. Just knocking
Hmm.
something out. I need to. I was telling my wife I should get a heavy bag and hang it in my in the garage. And she's like, "Oh man, are you gonna put like someone's face there or something?" And I go, "I don't know, but I just like relieving that sort of stress. It used to be that I could work out, and drive to the gym, but it's hard because there would be someone in the station. I'm like, man, I can't bench now. I can't go in this. I would
Yeah.
be waiting and I'd be even more stressed out. But yeah, I just needed something that was sort of immediate, and I think those were kind of my techniques, I guess.
Yeah, I had I not only with that idea where I'd be able to walk away, but I was asked. I was in therapy. I've actually recommended this guy's book. His name is John Arden. He is a fantastic fellow. He's actually in charge of psychiatrics for all of Northern California for Kaiser Permanente. So like he's kind of a big deal. And for
Hmm.
some reason they assigned me to him. So go figure. Take your mind on that one. I somehow got this guy as my therapist, and he asked me a question. He was like, "Okay, so if you normally handle your stress by walking away, how do you handle stress when you're on your job? Like when you're actually
Hmm.
online." This is back when I was at Twit and I was talking, and I'd be, we're talking to Tom and Sarah, and let's say a chat room troll showed up and they're just flaming me like crazy, which has happened a lot. And
Hmm.
I mean,
Like me.
at least in your head, well, not yes. It's funny how like when you know the person is totally cool,
Right.
but some people
Right.
think they know you, so they'll troll you as
Hmm.
if we're buddies. But I don't know that they're
Right.
just messing with me. I just think this person, depending on how my morning went, is a genuine jerk. So he
Hmm.
just yes. So I was asked, what do I do during those events where I can't leave? And I just told him, I'm like, what I do is I look at the next story and I'm like, I got to know what I'm talking about the next 5 minutes. He goes, well, can't you just do that in real life? And I was like, you mean like think ahead to the real life? He goes, yeah, like what are you going to do an hour from now? Or like, how is your day going to shape up for the rest of the day? And I was like, I kind of sat there and I was just like, that's a really good. What if I could just think about the next thing? So like instead of me getting it so worked up and angry in a relationship because spoons or a miscommunication happened, I'd be like, what do I want to do in an hour? It's like, oh, we still want to go out to dinner. Do I want to be fighting up till dinner? Do I
Mm.
want to do that? Or do I want to go like this is small, this is something I need to get past? It was a huge awakening for me when he explained this to me, and I was just like, okay, I can just simply do that. And so I would love physical activity for me also. Huge release, so much better. Like if I'll just I'll just start doing housework and I'm like, oh, look, there's cardboard to destroy. I won't use the box
Hmm.
cutter. I'm going to tear this
Hmm.
box up with my bare hands until they're tiny little pieces. Things like that really
Mm.
help me. And a lack of clutter. Now, you mentioned this, and it's weird that you mentioned this
Yes.
because when I started pursuing this idea of being content, one of the first things I started doing was I started becoming a bit of a minimalist. So if you look at my office right now, it looks like there's a lot of crap here. And I assure you, I could have a lot more crap if I chose to. But I I listened to this book called "It's All Too Much."
Oh, love the book. Peter
You
Walsh.
heard, yeah, Peter
Oh
Walsh,
yeah,
right? He
read
does.
it. Yeah, I read that twice.
He did a TV show on I think TLC, and it was about people who had a lot of stuff. It wasn't hoarders really, but
Hmm.
he'd come in and
Normal people.
he would help them remove their items, and
Hmm.
like you have a keep pile, a sale pile, and a donate pile. And
Hmm.
he wanted you to minimize what you had. And I really liked this idea because in the book there's this concept of if you have an item that you really love, like why is it sitting in a box in the
Hmm.
attic collecting dust? If this is something you really want to have and you really want to hang on to, shouldn't it be in a place of respect? And I was like, you know what? That's true. If I really am proud of certain things, why not put them on display? And if I'm not
Hmm.
actually going to do that, why am I hanging on to them? Did
Hmm.
so you've read this book. What did you get out of it?
I what I got out of it was that the stuff that we bought and the stuff that was on display was reflective of our attitude towards what it was. And so, for instance, I um, on one side, I won't mention which families or anything, but I know on my mom's, she was on my mom's side, she was very reflective of everything that she did for us. So, I would see a lot of families that would have their, photos that would still be in their envelopes. So when they would say, "Oh, here's some photos of our families and stuff," they would open up the box and you would see the photos are just stacked. But then on my mom's, they were always in albums. They're arranged in a certain way, and it's like you're reading through a story when you're going through these albums. They were captioned. They were on typewriter, and it was just amazing just seeing like the birth of myself and seeing all the crazy stuff I did when I was a kid. And when I go to visit other families' homes, at least certain ones that I've seen where they're just inside a box, I was thinking, wow, that must be very reflective, of how they thought about things. They just kind of move on, but was not very reflective. And it's the same thing we do when we shop for things like clothes and toys and games. So I noticed with myself that when I buy a ton of things like clothes or whatever, they would kind of sit in the wayside. They would just be folded or not even used. So it was sort of, to me, it felt like I was impulsive on certain things and not so impulsive on others. And it was the same thing with my wife. Like my wife and I fought a lot about our clutter. And she would try to keep everything, and I would try to be minimalist. And so she was very sentimental. I was not so sentimental. But we've now met in the middle where it was sort of like, look, we got to keep only just the things that really matter. And if someone comes into our home, it just kills me sometimes because, I mean, our house is not super messy or anything like that. But when I see there's boxes that are sitting out with with stuff that shouldn't be in boxes, it drives me insane. Um, and for my wife, it drives her insane when I start putting stuff out. And she's like, "Well, I need these." I go, "Why do you need them?" And she was like, and we both read this book together, and she was like, "Well, maybe I could get a couple of things out." And so she was really, really, resonating over the fact that if these are really important to me, as you said, I should have them out there. I should be able to just grab them. If I haven't been touching them for 6 months, why am I still holding on to them? I mean, I don't know if you visited a lot of, well, at least from the friends that I've had, they've had parents that would hold on to everything. I would walk through a bathroom where there's a dresser in the hallway, like in the bathroom. So the bathroom, you would walk in, there's like mirrors on one side, and then there's a dresser inside. A dresser, a full on with a whole, you know, pictures inside. And I'm thinking, God, do they really need this? And they would never touch it. They would never pull any towels from it or anything. It's just there. Um, and it was the same thing with it was different for my mom. My mom was very different. Um, if you notice, there's some people that when they're past their loved one has passed away, they would hold on to as much as they could. And but with my mom, and she was so close to my grandmother, she got rid of everything, which surprised me. She got rid of everything that she had in my grandma's room. She just took care of the bed, she still just had a few pictures here and there of her, but that was it. Everything else, including the clothes, she just got rid of them all. And I was thinking to myself, how did my mom do that? My mom was like, I'm ready to move on. I was always happy with grandma, and I could always visit her. And I'm pretty sure she's okay with that. And I was like, wow. And I just from learning from her, uh, I just learned that when you hold on to something, when you hold on to something that you're not using, it just typically means you're holding on to the past, and that's what I took from that book. Also, it's pretty reflective, but yeah, it's awesome to see like that happen, especially with my wife, because she really transformed as we were working together on the clutter.
When it comes to that stuff, like, so if there's an item that you wanted to hold on to, this idea of like, okay, I accomplished something when I was in my high school years, or
Yeah.
I have these awesome tickets that this was like the first concert I went to. I mean, either you frame them, you keep them up, and you can look at them all the time. What I ended up doing was, another suggestion from that book was, just take a picture of it. You
Yeah.
have the picture.
Yeah.
So, I have an online picture. It's available. I can have it and look at it when I want to. And if I really choose to be a person to curate a library, to have a nice iPhoto library or a Picasso library, whatever it is, at least I would have that. But at worst, if I'm going to keep it, let it be digital and it doesn't take up any physical space necessarily. I think technically speaking, it does take up physical space because it's on a platter. But you get what I'm saying here. And I think that actually is a part of being happy, because sometimes you start getting ruled by your possessions and you're like, oh no, you dropped this. Or like, I know this happened to me. So like I mentioned, my father died, and I'm like, everything he touched became really special to me all of a sudden. And then after a while, it took me like a couple of months, and I was like, you know what? I don't need to have his handwriting on a envelope, and I don't need to have an old artifact that he had throughout his school or something. I'm like, I've got 50% of his genetics. So like, there's nothing I can do about that. I'm always going to have that till the day I die, and it'll move with me whether I'm awake, asleep, alive or dead. I'm always going to have that, this thing. Like, I have his hands. So like, this boxy hand is his hand. I'm like, I know this hand. So it's just kind of like, it's not about the physical item. It's about the memory and having the respect for that memory. And if you want to really be at peace with it, instead of going like, oh no, you lost the item, and then like if Pulp Fiction, this is silly, Pulp Fiction has this storyline where his father's watch is really important, and losing that really messes up his head. And I didn't want that. I never wanted to be the guy who was just flipping out about possessions, because they're not important. Because if you're yelling at a human being that you love about a possession, you're setting yourself up to be woefully unhappy. And that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to own nothing. I was like, screw it, And I've also moved so many freaking times in my life that I'm like, I hate moving. I hate owning stuff. I'm so glad technology has gotten to the point where it has, where like theoretically I could start doing this whole show with an iPad, and like a decent little microphone. I could probably fit it all in a tiny briefcase. And I'm really glad technology is moving, because this is like, I'm looking at a giant 24-inch Dell, which is the old version, so it's getting hot in here. Anyway,
it's amazing. Like when you were talking about possessions, one of the possessions I'm having a hard time that I might let go, and this is probably going to be the hardest, is my games. I've grown up with them for so long, but now it's to the point where I haven't really almost touched anything, and I mean, I probably spent thousands, maybe 30 grand or 40 grand in games. It sounds unbelievable, but it's probably that much. And when I look at it, I mean, it's sitting pretty in the closet. Like, I could see like just racks and racks and racks of stuff all the way since like the 1980s. And I've always had this discussion with my wife, and I said, I could probably sell this all and probably make some profit to do it. And she's like, as long as you're okay with that. And for the most part, that's been like the hard step for me, is just thinking like, I need to be above my possessions. I need to think about where I need to be in the next, part of my life, which is the family. you know, I'm finding myself like, hanging out with my kids more, and they're like uh, doing Legos and drawing. Like my son gets a kick out of it when I draw him an X-wing or a Y-wing after watching Star Wars, and we make these these cardboard cutouts, out of nowhere. And that was more than anything that he ever liked when I bought him actual physical X-wings and Y-wings. He was sort of like, "Oh, I liked it when you were making it." And I'm like, "Okay, that's kind of awesome and cheaper for me." And the thing was, as a kid, when I'm watching them grow up as kid, watching my kids, it's funny how they can be happy with just the littlest thing. And in a way, I almost kind of look up to that, the fact that they're
Hmm.
just very pure. They have a very pure perspective, and they don't really need as much. And that's the problem I sort of see, like with like the families we see now, and especially, and I hate to say this, the Filipino families we see now. um, you will see uncles and aunties buy bigger and crazier gifts for their nieces and nephews, and then before you know it, there's too much stuff. And that's what happened with us. You just kept getting so many gifts. We would have parties and just more stuff just coming into the garage. And my wife and I would just be like, but such and such bought this for us, and such bought this for, bought that for us. And now it's sort of like, I don't think they will really care if we decide to either part away with it or sell it. I'm pretty sure the only feelings that would be hurt was our feelings. And I think that was the main thing. I think we just had to get over the fact that someone would be hurt from it. I think that's what it was. I for the longest time I held on to a lot of my grandma's possessions when she passed away, and when I saw my mom just move quickly forward, I was like, how come I can't be like that? I mean, that's my mom. Um, I guess to me, I was too. I kept thinking about the past, and I was holding on to all the little things, and I just had the little voice in my head, like you were saying, it's time to move on now, man. Like, and part of moving on is just letting go of some of this stuff. Now, I probably won't let go of my marathon medals, but for the big pieces, the big things like these old Transformers or whatever, or these huge like plastic vehicles that are probably only like $50. I probably should just get rid of them. And I'm pretty sure my buddy who probably paid for it, who was probably a close friend of mine, probably wouldn't be disappointed about it. I'm pretty sure he'd understand. And that's the thing that my wife and I talked about, is just not to take it personal, when we get rid of these possessions. So,
Yeah, the other thing about getting rid of possessions, I've always found there was a time where I had a mountain of comic books. By mountain, I mean like 26 long boxes worth of them. I mean, I had a ton of them. So after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm not getting a lot of joy out of them. They're in the boxes, and I'm really being uptight about them. And I read somewhere that somebody gave away comic books at Halloween for trick or treat. So they'd give candy and comic books. I'm
wow.
like, you know what? I bet that kid is going to get a more enjoyment out of that book at least tonight and maybe tomorrow than I would have for the next 6 months. So what I started doing was, if I'm going to give away something, I try to find somebody, or try to think of who should get it next.
Mm.
This is like a dumb one. I really kind of regret giving it away, but I had this great in the box Voltron toy that my best friend
Uh-huh.
got me after years, and there's a long history of me and Voltron, but I couldn't
Mhm.
take it with me because I was moving cross country from New York, and it was very difficult to move. But one of my friends had the same kind of connection to Voltron growing up, and I was like, "Hey, do you want this?" And she happened to work in the same building as I did. I'm like, "Do you want this?" She's like, "You're giving this to me?" I'm like, "Yeah." You would you actually keep it and make sure it's all right? She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, here you go." This kind of idea of like, if that person's gonna look at it and have a good time with it each time, give it to them, not just like sell it, make money. That's nice and everything. And I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but there's this weird like, it's kind of calming in my head to know it's somewhat safe with somebody who's going to either treat it with respect or do the same kind of thing, where you go like, look, if you get rid of this, pay it forward, give it to somebody
Mm.
else. Or comic books. I'm sure the kid, the little 9-year-old who was getting an Amazing Spider-Man because I kept it age appropriate. Um, I made sure that they at least they get something. They're like, there were
Right.
so many kids who were like you're giving us these, and I was like, yeah, they're for you, and they're like, wow, thanks, and they were like super happy, at least acting they were happy, and I was just like, that's enough for me. That
Oh,
worked.
that was your
I don't care if
reaction,
that
huh?
book was that.
That was your reaction. I mean, like that was like what feeling did you get from that when, you did that? I mean, I can imagine like if I was the kid and you were giving that to me, even if I wasn't the kid and I was just trick or treating at your door and you said, "Hey, Iyaz, what's going?" I get a freaking holy crap, Spider-Man #1. Thank you, dude. And I would give you
Yeah,
a hug
you're
before you
getting
give me the
like
candy.
these are like the books that then probably valued $5 to $10 a piece. So they were like they
Mm,
weren't like
man,
crappy books either. So like,
I know.
but I was like, I'm not doing anything with them. So here, but also if you try to sell them on the market, you don't really make that much, and it didn't.
Right.
That wasn't the point. It was about cleaning out some other stuff. Uh, but anyway, we should wrap up because we've been going for a while. I want to talk to you about one more thing before we go. You've been married. I want to talk about the power of communication or actually not saying what you're thinking. Because one of the biggest things I did wrong was constantly saying what I thought. And I realized at some point after reading a shit ton of books, sorry, I just swore there, was you know what? Sometimes every little thought you have doesn't need to be expressed. And if it annoyed you, maybe you just swallow it and let it go because the thing
Mm-hmm.
you're going to set off is going to be so much larger than the little thing you think is little. Just
Mm-hmm.
let it go. Have you ever found that to be true? Did you go, okay, look, you know what?
Absolutely.
Sometimes, yeah, because you mentioned something about like you're a straight shooter, and so does your wife, but communication battles happen because there's like this idea of I should be able to tell my significant other everything. You shouldn't. At least that's
Yeah.
my experience. What did you find?
My experience was not is not just that, but the timing. And what I meant by timing is, say for instance, my wife she's coming back from wherever she just went through a stressful ordeal. Maybe she just delivered our baby and she's driving back for whatever, and I say, well, did you get the garage opener? Bug over something so ridiculously simple that it's really trivial in the scheme of things, you know what I mean? And so I've always thought about the timing of when we need to, I don't want to say, oh, I guess you could say pester someone about something so trivial. They should probably hold it off till later. But as you said, I'm at fault for that too. I would say things I probably shouldn't be saying, especially during the most inappropriate times. Maybe I'm at a funeral, maybe I'm at her mom's house, and I go, well, this food doesn't smell that great, you know what I mean, or something like that. Not that I did say that, but I think it really just comes down to, like you were saying, being thoughtful about the words that come out of our mouth. You know what I mean? Just thinking about maybe we could just hold back. Maybe it's just that too. So I had to learn that because of the fact of the way I grew up. I grew up with a father that said whatever came out of his mind. So, and that was anything. And whether it was offensive, whether it was, not well thought out, that's kind of I thought was the norm for us. My mom was different. She was very thoughtful and careful about what she said, but they were very much opposites. And so, being as a man and a man growing up in the house, and my dad, I thought that was sort of the acceptable thing to do, and but it so happens that I ended up finding friends that had similar traits, and so I thought that was sort of normal. Then I meet my wife, who grew up with a different type of father, who grew up with a different type of household, and for the most part, we were trying to figure out our timing and figure out the words that we were using. Some words would offend more than others, and so that's kind of what was happening. Like for instance, there would be huge amounts of clutter on certain parts of the house, and I would say, well, I think I need to clear this part. She goes, well, you need to vacuum this piece first. I go, what? So, I mean, it was sort of that thing. Like we would kind of go tit for tat for a while, in terms of what we thought was important. So our values, like for her issues were that, she was into microbiology, right? So she was if something had if there was stuff everywhere, it didn't really matter. But if it was still clean per se in a in a micro sort of way, that's okay with her. But for me, it was like the clutter was the problem. I didn't really care if like there was E. coli or Ebola inside the house or something. And I think that was the thing that we were fighting about. But now we've gotten to the point where both of us understand the values and we understand like the timing of our communication. We know which buttons not to press. And now we're at the point where I would just, if I say something wrong, I kind of just walk away and say, okay, I'm not going to say anything over here because I know this is going to do it. This is going to set her off. But yeah, that's kind of, she knows it too, because when I do this, she's like, okay, he's mad. Then I just take a walk or I'll take a drive. But for the most part, it's been really good. But you're right. Communication is such a key thing, and I've made the same mistakes, probably worse. But I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at
I
it.
think that's all we can do. You have any final words of wisdom, and or do you want to promote anything? I always think that's weird to do on this, but yeah, if there's anything you'd like to mention, advice or otherwise, now's your time to do it.
Well, I don't really have much to promote except for Iyaz's show, and the fact that this has been. And the only tip I could probably say is to do, even if it's not a podcast. I mean, it's just cool for two friends like this to talk, because it's not just therapeutic, but then when you learn more about someone, especially someone that you admire, it makes a huge difference, and it creates a more colorful atmosphere with other people that have certain similarities. I mean, you start to understand other people more, and I'm hoping to do that more. I'm hoping to find more people like yourself to do stuff like this, because I think it's so important. It's crazy because there are people that have accomplished a lot of stuff in their lives like yourself. I mean, they're at the top of their game. Like, I think about, I mean, you obviously heard of that one actor who just died. I thought the world of this guy. I mean, but he OD'd, like he was on drugs. I forgot his name. Gosh darn it. Philip Seymour Hoffman, right?
Yeah, that one. He just
Yeah,
recently
that
died, but
guy.
like that happens so
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. But so will Hoffman, these are guys that I would look at and go, these guys are incredible actors, incredible performers, and then they're just gone. Steve McNair was an incredible quarterback, and he's gone. And it's just things like that. You don't realize that the core is just not there. But talking with you, I felt like you had your core in place. You had the things in place, and you accomplished a crap load of stuff. And I was like, I need to hang around with this dude. So yeah, and even though he makes fun of me during the chat room, and then tells me to go in my cage every once in a while, I'm like, that's all right, man. It's all good. I know this dude. He's I just felt like I could connect, and I think that as long as we have that kind of perspective of hoping that we should be able to do the same with the people who work around us. So
I'm trying to find that quote about everybody involved. So this idea of after our entire talk, the idea I've gotten in my head is to have a more peaceful life in general, even with just relationships or not even relationships, is to never forget that the other person you're talking to is a human being going through a struggle like you are. I mean, we're all trying to find the same thing. It's kind of a weird thing that we're all kind of trying to figure it out. And we see people who seem to be successful. They look like they're successful, but they're in a world of chemical dependency, or they are in pain and they're just hiding it. There's all this stuff that we're all collectively going through at the same time. And if we don't forget, if we just can somehow remember that the other guy, and I've tried to do this a bunch of times, if somebody is rude to me or they cut me off on the highway or something, I just try to think, you know what, maybe that guy's just having a bad day. I've had bad days, or I've made mistakes and I've accidentally cut off people, or I was just dumb and I just said the wrong thing. Maybe I should just cut this guy a break. So I think that with the idea that we've talked about perspective and death and this idea of humanity, don't forget each other's humanities. Like, the people are just trying. We're all trying. Like, I don't know if we'll ever figure out the key. I mean, don't forget, there's a bunch of people who are sitting around chanting, monks, just trying to figure out how to be happy. They figured this is the way to do it, by giving up all possessions. That's what they've chosen to do. And the rest of us is trying to do it by earning money and doing other crazy stuff. So,
that's me.
We're still trying to figure it out. That's all of, a lot of us are trying to do that. Those who are not monks are trying. So just be cool to each other if you can. Or as Bill and Ted's, be excellent to one another. Until next time. I'm Iyaz Akhtar, and that was Radford Castro. Thank you so much for being on this episode of Quest for Peace. We'll be back next week, I think. We do the show at gfqlive.tv on Sundays starting at 2 p.m. Pacific. I haven't bothered to say this. We live stream it. Andrew Zarian is kindly doing the producing. And we've got a chat room, so if you got ideas, you can always participate over there. We're going to have feeds very soon. Episodes will be available at gfqnetwork.com. Currently, you can find them all nicely collected at GFQ Network's YouTube page, or you can go to iyaz.tv, where I post all of these things up. Also, iyaz.tv has links to the resources we talked about. My therapist book called Rewire Your Brain. I'll have a link for Awaken the Giant Within, because I had never read that, and it's all too much by Peter Walsh. We'll have links to that for this episode. And I guess that does it for us. Good luck, everybody. We'll see everybody next week.